Hello, welcome back to another episode of Developing a Proper Worldview. This is going to be episode number 78. So, if you're new to the channel or you just happen to be catching this randomly, make sure you go back and watch these in order. It's very, very important that you do so because we're trying to build each week this worldview. We're developing, and so it's very important to not skip ahead. Um, we're in part five, I believe, which we're looking at martial law. So we started looking at the the gospel because, as I've said in every intro, this is a biblical issue. The New World Order is what the Bible calls the beast system, mentioned in Revelation chapter 13. It's a worldwide antichrist system, a worldwide Luciferian system with the goal of ridding itself of God and ridding itself of God's people. It's anti-Christian, anti-Bible. It wants to serve its various lusts to do whatever it wants without feeling guilt and shame. So in order to do that, society must rid itself of Christianity, of the gospel, and of those that proclaim the gospel. So that's the end game. That's where this is heading. It's a system that will persecute and martyr Christians, and it's a technological society with the ability to track and monitor, which is why Revelation 13 talks about a mark without which you'll be able to buy or sell. I believe that's going to be the implantable RFID microchip that'll be tied into banking and your records and everything else. It'll just be a chip in your hand that you scan. And because Christians will reject that, we will be it'll be easy for this system to cut us off and to persecute us, and so that's where this is all heading towards. And so that's why, as Christians, we're supposed to be alert and on guard and know these things. The Lord told us over and over to watch, to be on guard, to be alert. And so that's why we look into these things. It's not that we're afraid of them. It's not that we think that we can stop it through political might or through revolutions. That's not the case at all. Um, because God has prophesied this, because it's part of the plan to bring about the return of Jesus Christ. Um, we know it's coming, and we just want to have our hearts prepared. We want to be disconnected from this world as much as possible. And so in part one, we lay out the gospel because in order to understand what's really going on in the world, you have to have spiritual understanding. You must be born again. You have to be able to see things through the biblical lens because that is the truth. The Bible is the truth. And the world reacts according to God's plan. And so we have to understand what God's plan is in order to understand what's going on in the world. And so in part two, we discredited the pseudo-scientific theory of evolution, showing it to be a lie and just blatant propaganda that's used to discredit scriptures, to discredit creation, to discredit God. Part three, we looked at the American Empire because it's my opinion that the American Empire is the driving force behind the beast system, behind the New World Order. It's the muscle, it's the might, it's the driving force of this machine is the American Empire. And then in part four, we looked at the 9/11 conspiracy, um, which is a big issue for me because that's what it took to wake me up was investigating that. And I do believe that that was a significant event that just kind of launched the current New World Order agenda into place. It sped things up. It brought the New World Order into this new era where we're really on the precipice of it being unveiled. The technology exists. The people are in place. The world leaders are in place. The agenda is at work behind the scenes. Really, there's not much to stop it from coming forth. And then we're looking right now. We're in part 5 where we're looking at the might of this system and the means by which they'll persecute, the military might and the technology and the plans that they have in place. And so we're in the midst of the Camp FEMA documentary, and we're just about halfway, a little short of halfway through, I think. So that's where we're gonna pick up. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. Okay, here we go.
This is First Word, ladies and gentlemen. 877-367-2526. Whatever's in your head, call and share it at this moment. Hello.
Yeah, how you doing, Al? My name's Austin from Florida. I was recently looking around on the Army's website, army.mil, and I came across this document called the Civilian Inmate Labor Program. This was put out in 2005, and I was just reading over the first couple pages. Just in the first couple pages, this document on the Army's own website talks about converting military bases and installations into giant prisons and establishing civilian inmate labor programs. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
This is on army.mil if anyone wants to look it up.
Okay.
It came out in 2005.
Another conspiracy theory.
This is on the Army's website.
Do you see how they've trained people to dismiss things as conspiracy theory when they're uncomfortable? The guy's saying, look, this is on the Army's own website. That's not conspiracy, that's factual. You can go look that up. You know, he said it's on the Army website. So either this radio host is a part of the machine and he's willfully dismissing what he knows to be true because he's a deceiver, or he's deceived himself and has been programmed, has been trained to hear things outside of mainstream thought and dismiss them as conspiracy theory. Like, just think about that, the phrase conspiracy theory. You hear that and immediately it conjures up tinfoil hat wearing lunatics who believe in Loch Ness Monster and UFO abductions. You know, and so but that's purposeful. You've been trained to think that. The phrase itself, conspiracy theory. Conspiracy means a hidden agenda. Like, that is legit. People in power do things secretly. Have for all of history. You know, they plot and plan things without the public being aware of it. That is a conspiracy. And a theory is just saying we don't have hard facts. We don't have evidence. But based on what we're seeing here, this is what it looks like. Theory is that's how science is done. That's how thought is done. You know, you look at circumstances, you look at what's going on, and you theorize about how it came to be. And so conspiracy theory is just looking at it and going, this certainly looks like what we have historically seen, people in power plotting and planning things behind the scenes. So the phrase itself is a very good phrase. It's an intellectually honest phrase. It says, you know, I can't prove this. I don't have hard evidence, but it certainly looks like this. But because of the training, because of the media, the propaganda of the media, like, remember, from the 50s on, television is a hypnotic programming tool. That's why you ever hear the shows are called programs. You hear like old ladies, you know, I have to watch my program. You know, you're being programmed through the television. It has a blue light flicker rate that puts you into a hypnotic trance. That you can test that yourself. Set a child in front of a TV and watch them immediately go into a trance. You know, they just go into that zoned out, their tongue will hang out, they're hypnotized by it. And then the propaganda piece is the repetitive messages and the visual messages and the audio messages. So from the 50s on, they've been programming people with images and so-called authorities saying, oh, conspiracy theory, JFK, that just conspiracy theory, just so that people learn, so that they become programmed to, when they hear that word, to dismiss what's being said, to not give it rational, critical thought. Whereas if you're a thinking person, regardless of what's being said, you're going to look at it and go, you're going to try to look at it objectively and go, is there evidence to support this? If I can't put my hands on hard evidence doesn't make logical sense. Does it fit what I'm seeing in life? And so when somebody comes to you with a conspiracy theory, that ought to be your response. You ought to go, let me hear what they're saying, and let me see if it fits my worldview, see if it fits what's being told to me. So when we have a biblical understanding, when we understand the Bible and that God's plan, what he says is going to take place, that there will be a one world order, there will be a beast system, there will be a mark, there will be persecution of the Christians, there will be an antichrist system put into place, with something going in people's hands that they use to buy and sell. And that when we see that in Psalm 2, that the kings and rulers of the earth plot and plan against God, that the devil is referred to as the god of this world, lowercase g, that he's the prince of the power of the air, that he has authority over the kingdoms, and he gives them to whom he will. So we have that biblical framework. Then we look at what the world is doing, and you hear a conspiracy theory. Somebody comes to you and says, let me tell you about the New World Order. It's a one world government in which an authoritarian system controls everything. They're talking about these RFID implantable microchips to track and trace everything that's going on. They're setting up military prison camps. They're talking about population reduction, things of that nature. And then you see society continually becoming more and more immoral and disregarding God's rule and becoming more and more aggressive towards Christianity. You see those things, and you go, I might not be able to put my hands on hard evidence, although in this case, hard evidence is being pointed out. Like, look, here on the Army website, they're talking openly about it, and a lot of this is open talk. Almost every politician that you can think of the last 20 years talks about a new world order openly, and yet if you mention that to somebody, hey, there's a coming new world order, oh, that's crazy conspiracy talk. See, they're trained to just turn that, to not give that critical rational thought. So yeah, like I say, I don't know who this radio host is, but he's either too afraid, because when you hear about these things, I'm sure there's an initial panic within, like, I don't want to be, if there is something like this, I don't want to be seen as opposing it, so I better just go with the flow, and dismiss it outright. Or like I say, he's a deceiver who's been taught, this is the plan. Make sure you dismiss anybody who tries to come and expose it.
All right, so we're all going to be in prison, right? They're going to have prison.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, obviously there's a document that.
Yeah, there are lots of documents in lots of places.
But this on the military's on website.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Army.mil.
Okay. I'm an Army.mil. Says the link's broken. There's no such Army.mil. Can you get to Army? I can't get to Army.mil.
Army Regulation 210-35. Now, this was set up in 1986 secretly, and for 10 plus years it was secret. And in 1997, Bill Clinton declassified this, and we were the first major radio show to cover it. Since then, it's been expanded. This lists 12 camps to hold American citizens that have been built by the United States Army. And ladies and gentlemen, some of these facilities have U.S. citizens in them now. But it's all being done administratively. To beta test the Army running camps, they did deals with the federal government and now states to take prisoners convicted in the civilian courts and to then stick them on U.S. military bases administered by the Bureau of Prisons but operated by the U.S. Army. So see, they're taking state and federal prisoners and sticking them under Army control and building these civilian inmate labor camps all under Rex 84 right out in the open, and no media will ever touch this.
provide aid during national disaster, support after a terrorist attack, combat threat of illegal aliens.
Beginning in October, the Army plans to station an active unit inside.
So I haven't looked too much into it, but now they're pushing for these smart cities. So they, at some point, may not even need prison camps. We may just imprison ourselves. As far as just very rudimentary understanding of what these smart cities are. Like I said, I haven't looked into it, but the Internet of all things, how they want everything interconnected, and that's why the tracking device will be important, is we'll all be compacted into small cities, and you won't be able to leave a certain radius. And like your rations, everything you need will be within that like 6 square miles or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. And so we're imprisoning ourselves, and through that they'll have direct control. If they decide to implement some sort of population reduction thing, like coming with pokes, tainted pokes to eliminate a bunch of people, or to just drop chemtrails on them or something, I don't know. But so they may not need these camps. We may subject ourselves to it. If it's possible, I suggest you move out of cities. Try to get as far away from cities as possible. And if we're ever forced, if there's ever some sort of national emergency and they say for your own good and safety, report to so-and-so, do not report to so-and-so. Don't go where they tell you to go.
The United States.
Under Northcom and under the new Homeland Brigade, that was first going to be 3,000, and then 20,000, and then 40,000.
The 3rd Infantry Division's 1st Brigade combat team has spent 35 of the last 60 months in Iraq.
Combat-hardened troops who've been running camps and centers in Iraq are now coming back to the United States to, quote, carry out law enforcement actions.
The Army unit may be called upon to help with civil unrest and crowd control.
There has been some concern and some misimpressions that I'd like to correct. The primary purpose of this force is to provide help to people in need in the aftermath of a WMD-like event in the homeland. This force has got no role in civil disturbance or civil unrest, any of those kinds of things.
The Army Times reporting, quote, they may be called upon to help with civil unrest and crowd control or to deal with potentially horrific scenarios, end quote.
Northcom, the Northern Command that came into being in October of 2002, when that came in, people like me were concerned that the Pentagon was going to use its forces here in the United States, and now it looks like, in fact, it is, even though on its website it says it doesn't have units of its own. Now it's getting a unit of its own.
And the Army Times said during civil unrest inside the United States that the Army's new job would be engaging the American people.
The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 generally prohibits federal uniformed services from carrying out domestic law enforcement duties, except in cases expressly authorized by the Constitution or an act of Congress.
So in 2006, they nullified Posse Comitatus.
They can't just come in and say, I want to see everything in your car. I want to see everything in your house. I want to go through your computer. You either have to voluntarily hand that over to them, or they have to have probable cause and get a warrant to do that. So it's very clear that the government does not have the authority to be spying on us. That was not the intent of our founders when they created this system of government.
Over the last decade, we've seen the introduction and enactment of some of the most dangerous legislation ever to be conceived by our elected officials, who have not forgotten who they serve, but only now reveal to the American people, through the fruit of their own actions, that our rights and our freedoms are secondary. The USA Patriot Act allows for American citizens to be picked up and incarcerated indefinitely without charges, and allows law enforcement to conduct warrantless and secret searches of Americans' property and possessions. The Military Commissions Act dissolved the cornerstone of our Constitution, by removing the writ of habeas corpus, allowing the permanent imprisonment of enemy combatants, and disallowing petitions to the court to know why you've been locked up in the first place. Although never passed by the Senate, the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act shows us the mindset of our leaders in Washington. If passed into law, the bill would make public demonstrations and protesting into an act of terrorism and label the organizers as thought criminals and potential homegrown terrorists. Now that the federal government has the authority to sneak, snatch, and lock up its own citizens, a new bill has been introduced by Congress that gives the feds a place to hold those outspoken dissenters and potential domestic terrorists. The National Emergency Centers Establishment Act, or H.R. 645, allocates military bases to be converted into FEMA emergency centers. It also mandates that these camps be built complete with public works, medical, and educational facilities, just like the Japanese internment camps of the 1940s.
Why is the media on one hand saying there are no FEMA camps, but on the other hand, legislation has been introduced to build them?
H.R. 645, titled the National Emergency Centers Act, directs the Secretary of Homeland Security to establish national emergency centers throughout the United States.
It's all being done for your own good.
The bill directs these camps to be built in existing military installations, whether operational or not, for the stated purpose of providing temporary housing and to meet other appropriate needs as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Defense.
Here's H.R. 645 legalizing what has already been developed, what's already been paid for by FEMA. And that is these FEMA camps for everybody's safety, these FEMA camps for everybody's comfort, these FEMA camps that the people need during emergencies.
The government doesn't build things that are not needed or that there aren't contingency plans that say there's a reason for them.
Also, it's been reported by WorldNet Daily that the Department of Homeland Security has already awarded nearly a $400 million contract to Halliburton to build some temporary detention centers on an as-needed basis.
We know this is their main attack profile, is old, shut-down bases. And so you go point them out and go, look, the barbed wire's facing in, or look, this is a designated FEMA camp. And they say, well, where are the people? Where are the people in the camp? The point is, it's a designated facility for that.
Conceivably, these are the kinds of camps that could be used for political dissidents, just like occurred in Nazi Germany.
I got a feeling in the next few years that you may start to see some American citizens end up in these camps for questioning the government.
The president can declare a national emergency, and it can be anything. It can be a hurricane, or it can be political protests or civil disorders like we saw in the race riots. I think the government's anticipating that there's going to be a increased reaction against the economic downturn, and this could lead to kinds of street riots and protests we've seen in countries such as France.
If we do not have a government which is controlled and limited by the Constitution, then our personal motives and preferences are irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you have freedom of speech if you're in a FEMA concentration camp. It doesn't matter. You're certainly not going to be allowed to have a gun inside a concentration camp. And, all of our rights are predicated on a free America. And if we don't have a free America, all of the other questions become moot.
Don't these companies have a responsibility morally if they're in there building camps and building shackles and building barbed wire facing in to speak out and say this is unconstitutional in the United States? Well, of course they do, but Kellogg, Brown, and Root?
You understand why it's important when he says they're building with barbed wire facing in? If the barbed wire is on the outside of the fence, that's to keep people from getting inside. If it's on the inside of the fence, like a prison, that's meant to keep people in it from getting out. And if these are just meant as for American citizens to be rounded up, you're immediately a prisoner when you're put inside something like that. I had another thought too, but it came and went. Oh well.
Was connected to some of the contracting that went on at Camp X-Ray, Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. So this is their business.
I talked to the Department of Homeland Security spokespeople, and they affirmed the contract with this KBR, the former Halliburton company, was in place. The Department of Homeland Security was ready to build these contingency as needed detention centers anywhere in the country in the event of any kind of a national emergency, including natural disasters or, again, riots or protests.
Just because you think someone might commit a crime doesn't mean that they have done anything, and does not mean that you have the right to punish them for what you think they are going to do. You know, in our system of government, you're supposed to be innocent until you are proven guilty, not guilty until you're proven innocent. And so if you can be declared guilty or potentially guilty before you even lift a finger, that is bordering on thought crime. That is bordering on punishing people for pre-crime.
Think about where we're at now with the society they've created. They effectively used Trump to divide this country right down the middle. You know, you're either vehemently for Trump or vehemently opposed to him, and there's no discourse between the two sides. There's just violence. They've essentially like poured gasoline all over the country, and gunpowder, and now they're just waiting for a spark. You know, they've set it all up effectively. And once that spark comes, then they can roll out all this martial law. And think about the things they've done already, where they're censoring, and like the terminology they use, like calling the media will blast and call Trump supporters radical extremists. You know, you've heard politicians refer to them as dangerous white supremacists. All these trigger words that are just so painting people as criminals that haven't done anything wrong, just because they're opposed to the agenda's political viewpoint. Even though I'm not a Trump guy, I think Trump is just a stooge. He's just being used. He speaks a lot of good rhetoric, but when he was in power, he didn't do anything to implement it. He's just a tool, whether willingly or unwillingly, I don't know. But he's being used by the system to foment this rage in society. Like, dude, there were so many people I knew that were anti-Trump, where you could not even begin to have a conversation. You couldn't even mention Trump without them getting violently angry and just like foaming at the mouth. It was insane. It was like, dude, and time and time again, what I found was these are people that sit and watch the news all day long. They just get that programming all day long. Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad, racist, bigot, you know, homophobe, sexist. And so they're just filled with all this inner rage that just the mention of them, and they fly off the handle. It was nuts. And so, I mean, imagine if he wins next year, you know, that's all coming back. And like I say, it's a powder keg just waiting to be lit. So, oh man, what just happened? Oh, I just happened to pause it at a perfect timing there. Sometime in the not too distant future. Oh, she's reading Mark Dice book, Resistance. Bible. This is what it's going to be in the future.
I never understood these words before the thought police showed up at my front door. Liberty isn't something that we touch or feel or grasp in our hands. You can't taste it or smell it or hear it. It doesn't have a particular shape or size or color. It's intangible, elusive, and in constant need of nurturing, or else it withers and dies on the vines of tyranny.
Modern tyranny is a lot more sophisticated than the Hitlerian or Stalin-esque things we've seen in the past. But even in Hitler's day, they knew how to sell it. And they advertised the camps as, hey, look, people don't like you here in the Warsaw Ghetto. You're not allowed to have jobs. You're not allowed to work. Get on the trains. We're coming to take you to a safer place. We're going to be able to work and be amongst your own people. They put them on trains, took them to the camps, killed the old and infirm, worked the other people to death. And they advertised, hey, we're going to delouse you, going to give you a shower, march right in here.
You have arrived at Sobibor. You are in eastern Poland. This is a labor camp. We have brought you here to work. You will work hard, but hard work is good for the soul. So in reality, we are your benefactors. You will be housed, you will be fed. All we ask is your cooperation. If you do your job, you will have nothing to fear. You will be given postcards. Write to your relatives, friends, to tell them that you have arrived here safely. We will mail them for you. Unfortunately, there have been reports that typhus has broken out at several labor camps. We do not want typhus at Sobibor. Therefore, first you will be taken to the shower facility. You will each have a hot shower. Naturally, men and women will shower separately. Women will have their hair cut short before they shower. While you are showering, your clothing will be disinfected. Remember, the better your behavior, the easier your stay will be.
As they roll this system out, this total federalization out, they're selling it as if the FEMA camp is a place that the disadvantaged and the poor and the illegal aliens, as the economy collapses, will need to come, will need to stay. Now, in this more modern, sophisticated system, they're going to advertise the camps. They're going to show people getting the free concert, with a rock and roll star, or the Sunday night movie, or the free medical care, and they're going to be beating down the doors to get in the camps.
Another way is to have an economic collapse that's fabricated. Okay, you cut lending from banks. Nobody has any money anymore. The economy tanks. Okay, then you've got massive people homeless everywhere. Then there's a problem. Economic collapse. The reaction is people get desperate, need a home. Solution is we present the home to you, which is the FEMA camp, which will be advertised as a wonderful place. Of course, it's a lie.
I think that's probably exactly how it's going to happen.
So what you have there is they fabricate a problem to create reactions, which gives the solution they originally wanted in the beginning, which was to get everybody into the FEMA camps. That's how this is the story of history. It's happened over and over and over. If you can detain people, I would call them quasi-concentration camps.
The surveillance grids and drones and stuff like that we have nowadays, like, a lot of this stuff is even irrelevant. They don't even need that. They can lock down a smart city, use cameras and drones, and you're not going to be able to escape their sight, unless God intervenes and helps you, but You'll have a drone up in the air with infrared, being able to pick up on heat signatures. And there's cameras on every single corner. And now everybody's got the doorbell thing, the Ring, and you got your phones, and tracking is everywhere, man. It's overwhelming. It's like we're creating our own prison system with technology.
In 1999, American citizens were put in the Sandpoint Naval Brig outside of Seattle, Washington, and the news reported that FEMA was in control of the operation and was using the closed naval base as a mass.
This is off topic, but I just saw this the other day too. I don't have any way to verify it, but it made sense. It was supposedly a guy that's a former CIA agent explaining how the government has a contract to use Walmarts, which is why you see Walmarts popping up every 15, 30 miles. I mean, in every major town, every city has numerous Walmarts. But what he was saying is that this same ordering system that Walmart has in place to order products and ship products and everything, the military is tapped into that as well. For military supplies and armaments. So in a day, you could have National Guard, infantries, or Army, or Marines or whatever take over Walmarts and use their internal ordering system to transport supplies and weapons. And you think about that, and then they can operate out of there as a base. So in addition to having prison camps, like, we're surrounded by potential military bases that can, in one day, in 24 hours, can be, just completely, we're surrounded by it. And then, like I say, with the drone technology, was it Obama that said he wanted like 80,000 drones in the sky? Most of them, we probably, like, the ones they sell to the public are pretty neat. My buddy's got one, he always flies around. But the government has probably advanced way beyond that. I saw years ago that they were putting like cameras in drones shaped like flies or bees, tiny little, so that they could be everywhere, you wouldn't even know it. And then also I saw they had drones with weapons, with guns that could shoot. So the surveillance grid, the lockdown grid, the capability they have is pretty mind-blowing. If we didn't have the security in Christ, it would be pretty terrifying, because it's all encompassing and very powerful, and you're not going to resist it, and you're not going to be able to stand against this beast system unless you have Christ, unless God is protecting you, and he's going to do what he wants sovereignly with you. So, and he tells us not to fear those that can kill. So we don't have to worry about any of this. But we want to be aware of it and alert, and know what to avoid and what to stay away from, and just have your heart prepared.
Prison, and the people were put in plastic handcuffs and taken indoors, inside warehouse areas that had barbed wire fences, porta potties, and cots. The same system we saw set up at Pier 57 a few years later in 2004 for the Republican National Convention in New York City. Convention protest groups are not happy with what they call a clandestine detention center.
We discovered officers that had to spray tear gas to control one protester, and then at least 4 officers held down another protester.
The recent discovery of a makeshift jail in Denver's warehouse district is causing outrage among some.
It's a warehouse filled with makeshift jail cells to be used if there are mass arrests.
It was apparently constructed to hold DNC protesters.
Those cages are for the safety of law enforcement agents and those who are arrested, but Recreate 68 calls this place a concentration camp, unfit and inappropriate.
We don't need another gulag or stalag or prison, whatever you want to call it, to house people who just want to express an opinion of a better world. That's why we have the protest.
This lot sitting right next to where we're filming right now, it's fairly big, comprising several acres. That itself can be readily turned into a holding area by virtue of some concertina wire, some observation guard post, and a security ring. Doesn't take much. It can be a sports arena. It could be abandoned airports. It could be abandoned military facilities. Any place that you could set up a security perimeter could be used as a temporary internment camp.
Well, it's recording. We got a FEMA RV thing right over here.
I don't think that's a big deal. I think it's
A security guard. Yeah, but why is a FEMA RV parked in front of the mall?
in front of the mall. In front of the closed part of the mall.
That's real weird.
Dude, look, it says Department of Homeland
It's the
Security.
Department of Homeland Security parked in front of the mall?
In front of that closed part, though. Can you go? No, you can go in there.
What kind of... Why do we need Homeland Security at the mall?
No.
Do we need Homeland Security right here? Look, it says it right there. That says U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And why are they parked in front of the mall?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
What are y'all doing here?
We just saw.
I just want to know. I want to know what y'all are doing here.
Step outside, please.
Will you tell me what's going on?
I will be more than happy as soon as you step outside.
Sure.
Is there a reason you're doing that?
We just saw the FEMA cam and I thought y'all were part of the... Is there some sort of emergency or what's going on?
Already been shut down. Or not the mall. The store had already been shut down. But
Is there some reason why FEMA's here, though?
in case Ike hits.
In case Ike?
In case
I've already
what?
told him he's not.
Dude, you're just a security guard. I'm
Yeah.
a security guard. Don't say
Yeah,
that.
I'm sorry, we're part of an organization that is just making sure everybody...
These authoritarians, you notice they always say, you can't film. Really? It's so stupid, man. Oh, it's wicked. These people ought to be ashamed of themselves, security guards. You know, if you're an American citizen, you know, just following orders is not an excuse, man. People need to... That's the worst, man, is the military and the police that do not uphold their oath. And I know these are just security guards, but whatever. But in general, like police and military that forget their oath to defend the Constitution, and instead they just follow orders. That's wicked, man. That's wicked and dangerous.
Everybody understands what's going on these days. I don't understand why y'all are here, though.
Well informed.
I still didn't explain why y'all are here.
I'm not going to, okay? Just don't step
So
back.
what kind of operations are going on inside?
Have a good night.
Just tell me what kind of operations are going on inside.
They built the temporary detention center. It was about 780 beds that have really made it.
Another thing I want to point out too, this goes for people preaching the gospel too. But anyway, if you're going to try to get answers from an authoritarian, do not be confrontational like that. Don't be argumentative. Don't raise your voice. Don't if you're really trying to get a legitimate answer out of them, you know, don't escalate the situation. Be wise. You know, be subtle. Be calm. A soft answer. You know, and be respectful. Because that's they think they're powerful. They're going to respond well if you're submissive. You know, so if you're really wanting to get answers, like I would have just went up and said, "Hey, officer," or Hey, sir, how are you today? And I happen to notice a FEMA van there. Do we need to be worried about anything? Are we going to be attacked? Is the mall in danger? Do I need to get my wife out of here or anything? And then just wait to hear what they say, and then say, so what's going on in there? What are you guys doing? And listen. Don't keep interrupting them. Don't raise the voice. You just have to be smart about how you ask things.
We still have a long road ahead of us, but FEMA's going to stick with us, and I know we'll make it.
It's a $37 million facility. It was built in Indiana. It was modeled off of a modern facility in Michigan. It originally was designed in the States and brought down here in sections, so we put it together like one big Lego piece.
Then people started noticing on the backs of flatback rail cars these little 1 and 2 person mobile concrete jail cells. And those indeed have been manufactured by the tens of thousands and purchased by the federal government and local governments. And they've been stockpiling on county, city, state, and federal land hundreds and hundreds and hundreds per site of these little mobile concrete jail cells. So there certainly is a buildup of that type of equipment.
So I want to say this, and you'd have to pray through it, but if anything pops off, national emergency, where they start telling you, come here, go there. A, don't do that. B, don't become so accustomed to your comfort, to your materialistic lifestyle, that you hang on to it too long. Be ready to leave it all behind. Go to the wilderness. Do what you got to do. Get out. 3, if you do get caught, you do get locked up, try to escape. Why would you sit there in that? Go, get out of there. Do what you got to do to get out. Nothing good is going to happen to you in there. And then 4, if we are, a lot of us are probably called to martyrdom. If this happens in our lifetime, I think most Christians will probably be killed. Very few of us are going to survive the whole beast system. But we don't have to fear. We don't love our lives to the point where we deny Christ. We're willing to die for him. We're willing to die for the truth, because to die is gain. We're going to eternal glory. So just don't hold on to this life so much that you fear giving up, because fear is what will drive a lot of people to compromise. And truth doesn't compromise. Stand, or run. Do what you got to do. Some of us will be called to go and preach boldly and give our lives. But I see nothing wrong with running either. Matthew 24 talks about how, I'm not exactly sure what it was referring to, but it talks about let those who are in the field or whatever flee, run to the mountains. Don't even look back. Don't go back for your coat or jacket. So fleeing is an appropriate response sometimes. Just be wise. Understand that the government is not good, and whatever they're telling you to do, it's dangerous. I thought we were on the precipice a couple years ago when they started talking about curfews, and all of a sudden we had to walk, and remember they had in the stores arrows telling you which way to walk, like the disease would somehow, if you walk in the right direction, somehow that's gonna stop the pandemic. What a bunch of nonsense. But I thought at that point, man, we might be on the precipice of something big here, but that may have just been a trial run. So
Several years ago, the military issued a challenge to create a faster and better razor tape. They wanted a barrier that would be at least 50 inches taller than the standard fence, and one that could be deployed faster than 30 man-hours.
Ulster County-based Cobra Systems is getting ready to ship the first batch of its express razor wire to the U.S. military. The system allows soldiers to lay hundreds of yards of wire from the back of a vehicle just a few moments.
This is more of an action of a country that has gone absolutely berserk, that they feel that they would have to jail their own citizens, that the government would fear its own people so much that they would be talking about detaining people or incarcerating them or vetting them or investigating them or whatever. This whole thing has been turned on its head. So anytime that you can demonstrate the power of government and you want to condition people into a way of thinking or to intimidate them or make them fearful, do actions that are going to put the fear of government and authority in people's hearts, strike that chord and make them shut up. Just when people in this country should be doing exactly the opposite, because I don't even recognize this country anymore.
Attention, attention, attention. American forces are here to help. Remain calm. We will not tolerate civil disobedience.
Military Occupational Specialty Internment Resettlement Specialist. This MOS plays an integral role in providing a uniform system of handling prisoners and detainees. Trained as internment resettlement specialists to control and supervise detainees to ensure their humane treatment. For this job, the Army will train you to use specialized equipment to monitor activity, to conduct searches, and to inspect areas where prisoners work and live. Here, you'll train to in-process prisoners and detainees, and to brief them on their rights. After your initial entry training and advanced individual training, you'll work long hours, day or night, in a garrison or field environment, where you may practice emergency procedures, detect and confiscate contraband, and escort prisoners outside the facility. Military Occupational Specialty Internment Resettlement Specialist.
The burden of service has fallen almost exclusively onto the backs of our military. And that's why I won't just ask for your vote as a candidate. I will ask for your service and your active citizenship when I'm President of the United States.
Citizenship is not an entitlement program. It comes with responsibilities.
A young person joining our military must know that we will only send them into harm's way when we absolutely must. We need to ease the burden on our troops while meeting the challenges of the 21st century. People of all ages, stations, and skills will be asked to serve. Because when it comes to the challenges we face, the American people are not the problem, they are the answer. We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
Everybody somewhere between the ages of 18 and 25 will serve 3 months of basic training and understanding in a kind of civil defense. That universal sense of service, somewhere between ages of 18 and 25, will give Americans, once again, a sense of what they are to be American and their contribution to a country and a common experience.
We were taught, my brother and I, is that you have an obligation to give back. That's why community service has been such a big part of my life. Our troops need to know that we're making the same commitment to this country that they've made.
I love Obama.
We're gonna spread freedom. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna lead 'em.
Since then, even the New York Times has reported that they're training the Boy Scouts now with Homeland Security to, quote, take on disgruntled veterans and gun owners in, quote, seek and destroy operations. And they had photos in the New York Times of these kids dressed up in Homeland Security outfits going after veterans and gun owners.
It's disgusting.
Stalin said, give me somebody before age 7, I can turn them into anything I want. So that's why there's this push. Get the kids into the school system. Get them to not follow evidence. Get them to only do as they're told. Get them to be little robots. Get them to think it's normal to march up in lines and act like little soldiers and so forth. And then later in life, they'll never know the difference.
Everybody has to get rid of the idea that they're an individual. They have to understand that we all have to work in the group for the collective, for the good of the whole. Not for the good of your child or for the good of the teacher, for the good of the whole. If you have to give up some of your most cherished beliefs, and that they have to train you to give these up, because it's going to be for the good of the whole, you give it up.
What this legislation does then is to help harness this patriotism and connect
Dude, this kind of these New World Order elitists make me so angry. Like, we have to constantly remind ourselves that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. It's not them, it's the principalities and powers behind them. It's the ideologies being taught to them, the demonic ideologies. But that's so hard to do when they're saying things like that woman was just saying. It's like these treasonous people, like the flesh part of you is like, man, they need to be executed. They need to be... It's sickening, you know, this anti-freedom, anti-human, like these totalitarian ideas that they espouse, and they look down upon others as, like, the idea is, like, you do them then, elitists. You know, you if population reduction is what's needed, you go sacrifice yourself. Why does everybody else have to do it? Why is it the peons, the peasants, the cattle that need to do it? You know, what makes them think that they're superior, that they're above, that they get to what kind of human being thinks they get to dictate to anybody else what they need to do or how they need to live their life? It's sickening. But they're deceived puppets is what they are. There are monstrous demonic powers pulling the strings. These demonic ideas are whispered into their ears. They're taught these things, and the teaching, you know, and the teachers are the ones that are the enemy. It's hard to keep that in mind when they're in your face spewing their evil. That's why, you know, you got to take a break from this stuff every once in a while. Like, as much as I admire Alex Jones, like, the dude's been doing this now for like 30 years, every day, several hours a day, looking into the face of evil. And then you wonder why he is the way he is. He's just like a ball of rage. And it's understandable. It's like, dude, he's looking into the face of evil all the time. Of course he's going to feel this way. You know, you gotta step back from it so you can remind yourself, okay, this is a spiritual battle, not physical. Like, for me, this once a week video here is enough. You know, I can't do much more than this.
needs. We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
They've been turning on the American people and working against our interests for a number of years. And the people that you may be seeing that are going to be targeted to be put into these camps, these dissidents, these disenfranchised, disaffected people, the government would never, ever turn on the American people. They would never create a situation where they were so displeased with their government that the government may be forced to throw these people in concentration camps. They'd never do that, would they?
My name is Sam Ozaki. I'm a native-born American citizen, Los Angeles, California, along with about 120,000 other persons of Japanese ancestry when Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. We were all rounded up like cattle and placed into America's concentration camps. They had designated areas where people would report, and they were transported by bus to they called them assembly centers. They didn't have facilities to house 120,000 persons, so they took over racetracks, fairgrounds, places like that. Work in the camp was slave labor. In fact, they had us making camouflage nets for the United States Army. Now that was absolutely slave labor. Later on, I said we should all have refused to work and then let the Army and the government come in and do all the chores that had to be done. But as I said, we had lost all our, not only our life and liberty, but also our finances. You know, when you think about it later on, we were not much better than Hitler. On the other hand, we have to say that at least we were not gassed and murdered like the thousands that were killed, millions really, in Europe. Although I have to say that there were at least 10 persons shot and killed by American guards simply because they got too close to the barbed wire fence that was surrounding the camps.
American citizens.
Native-born American citizens, like myself, were denied life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in total violation of all the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and so forth. Every morning the children would stand up, face the American flag with liberty and justice for all. You know, psychologically, it really affected us. That's why, for example, I mentioned earlier on that there were many parents who never even told their children.
You know, and there's so many wicked people out there that think, well, as long as it's not happening to me, then, you know, I don't care. And they think, because they're a part of the system. But here's the problem. Yeah, they're going to come after Christians. They're going to come after patriots. They're going to come after Second Amendment enthusiasts, anti-New World Order people. They're going to come after them. But you are not elite. You're not one of them. You know, so as soon as you lose your value to them, as soon as you're no longer able to labor for them or produce for them or give them something, if you're too old or too weak or whatever, you're going to be done away with too. You know, you can't trick yourself into thinking you're part of them. You're not. You know, they're an elite, small group, an oligarchy. You know, they're not sharing that power with you. You're their dog. You're their servant. You know, and as soon as you've lost your usefulness, you're done too. You know, so people who think that, like I had somebody tell me, I was talking about censorship and how eventually Christians are not going to be able to proclaim the gospel anymore. It'll be illegal for us to stand on the streets. And the person said, well, even if that does happen, it won't happen in your lifetime. Like somehow that makes it okay. Like, what about the next generation? You know, it's very selfish to just say, oh well, I'll let the next person worry about it. That's evil, you know? We need to resist it at all times, passively, not aggressively. As Christians, we don't participate in violence. You know, we're not going to change the system. The New World Order system is that we're separate from it. We're of a different kingdom. We're aliens, pilgrims, and strangers. But we're going to speak out against it, and we're going to warn people, and we're going to try to get people to see the dangers that they're in, and then offer them the solution, Jesus Christ. Come over into our kingdom.
That they had been in concentration camps because they were ashamed. We should not be ashamed. It was the United States government that should be totally ashamed of their behavior and putting 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry in America's concentration camps. And you have to be alert because it can happen again.
If we look at American history between 1942 and 1947, the data that was collected by the Census Bureau was handed over to the FBI and other organizations at the request of President Roosevelt. And that's how the Japanese were rounded up and put into the internment camps. I'm not saying that that's what the administration is planning to do, but I am saying that private personal information that was given to the Census Bureau in the 1940s was used against Americans to round them up. I think there is a point when you say enough is enough to government intrusion. And you had mentioned this earlier, 28 pages. I have the survey right here, Glenn. This is the 28-page survey. This is the short form that every American will get next year. Does the federal government really need to know our phone numbers? Do they really need to know, like you said, the date and time that we leave, mental stability? You know the one question that's not on this survey, Glenn? Are you a U.S. citizen? I am just not comfortable with the way this census is being handled, with associating with ACORN, with the questions that are being asked, with Americans being compelled to give this information. How will this be cross-checked? Will it be held privately?
It's up to a $5,000 fine.
They're saying that if somebody who is connected with ACORN, now working for the U.S. Census, shows up at your door, knocks on it, and demands to know your race, your employment status, the name of everybody in your household, whether you've ever received food stamps, and your phone number, and everybody else's phone number, and you say, I'm not really comfortable giving that to you, you're going to get fined $5,000. The United States government between 1942 and 1947 passed the Second War Powers Act. They used the U.S. Census information to round up the Japanese and put them in the internment camps. Okay. Americans were told that they wouldn't have their information used against them. They did.
I mean, that exists already. They know where we are.
Well, one of the things that we're fighting here in Oklahoma City, we have a radio show called Radio Free Oklahoma, and we try to get the information out about the upcoming swine flu vaccines. You hear that Northcom is coordinating with FEMA to work for the mandatory vaccinations. There's all the legal framework in place through the Patriot Acts and the Emergency Medical Powers Act to force these vaccines on people. And then if you deny it, you know, where are you going to go? Well, they say that you can be charged with a felony or put into a quarantine area. Now it's starting to come into view how these camps could be used.
Well, today we're in a circumstance where the economic and the political dynamics are pushing America and the whole world into a crisis dynamic. This crisis is being created through the process of sustainable development policy. Several things are occurring. One is that our system of justice is being changed. We're shifting from equal justice, where every human being has certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and property, etc., to a system of social justice where no one has any such right, but where people are judged based upon the group that they're part of.
Previously, there have been several reports, such as the MIAC report in the state of Missouri, but this is the first time that a report such as this actually named individuals. Once you label someone in a derogatory manner, an extremist, a potential militia member, terrorist, whatever term is used, for some people the moniker will remain. Before you can persecute people, before you can incarcerate large numbers of people, you have to marginalize them. You have to create the image that these people are dangerous to society, or they're extremists or radicals, call them what you will, but marginalize them from the mainstream of society, so that at that point the rest of society will accept the persecution that might result upon this group. It's been an age-old strategy that's worked in every totalitarian regime in the history of the world, and that's why we're concerned here in the United States when we see this kind of marginalization going on about people who voted for Ron Paul or people who voted for Chuck Baldwin. Why are they being marginalized? Why are they being singled out as a potential danger to society? And I think it's shades of the strategies and tactics of totalitarian regimes in history past, and that should never happen in this country.
The people in Washington, D.C. haven't represented what was on the American people's minds for a long, long time. They are the most disassociated, discombobulated, disconnected people on this planet. And they necessarily had to do that for all the violations of the Constitution that they've done.
Just how far are you willing to go before you stand up and say no more to the federal government? Our founders actually intended for the federal government to be very small and limited, and that most of the service of government was to be done in the states. And so I think there's probably a growing conflict between states and the federal government. And I think there's some really good reason for the federal government to be concerned right now, because I think there are a lot of people in the United States that are beginning to say, where are we going to draw the line in the sand and say no more to the federal government?
America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it'll be because we destroyed ourselves. Jefferson? Oh, Lincoln.
Every generation faces tyranny. Every generation faces corruption and is forced to stand up against it or become enslaved. Our ancestors fought and died so that we'd have the little bit of liberty we have now. It is a sacred treasure. And from liberty comes all prosperity. The human race is depending on all of you out there that are seeing this information to educate yourself on the facts presented in this film and then to take action.
We've got to forget about Washington, D.C. I think Washington, D.C. is too far gone. It's a cesspool of iniquity. I think it's totally and thoroughly corrupt. It doesn't matter which party you put in charge of the White House or Congress, nothing of substance changes. I really think the power and strength of the people rests where it always has rested, and that is with the states.
So we need to start putting some teeth into our state laws, and we need to be electing sheriffs that are going to protect us from federal agents when they initially don't understand this because their civics lessons weren't very good in school.
The 10th Amendment very clearly says any authority not granted to the federal government by the Constitution belongs to we the people and the sovereign states that make up this union.
The states had all the power. They gave some few powers that are listed in the Constitution to the federal government and kept all the rest for themselves.
Well, my first guest works for the people of Oklahoma, and he's trying to do right by them. But he believes it's kind of hard to do that when the federal government keeps butting into the state's business. And now he's working to pass a bill in the state of Oklahoma that would declare state sovereignty from the federal government.
Well, the resolution is saying that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land and that it specifically delegates certain powers to the federal government, and all other powers are reserved to the people and the states, and that the federal government has increasingly moved out of that framework over the last several decades, and that they need to get back into that proper role.
A number of states already have them. Many more are considering similar resolutions as a bulwark, proponents say, against the federal government handing down laws that they see as unfunded or unconstitutional.
Ongoing pattern of overstepping its constitutional authority.
Dozens of states are now considering resolutions asserting their sovereignty under the 10th Amendment in the Constitution, pushing back against Washington's intrusion into everything from land use to gun control.
And there's really somewhat of an uprising in the states across the country is this federal law called the Real ID Act.
Texas appears ready to declare its sovereignty again. A resolution doing just that has the unabashed endorsement of the state's governor.
I believe the federal government has become oppressive. I believe it's become oppressive in its size, its intrusion in the lives of its citizens, and its interference with the affairs of our state.
The bill, HCR 50, is currently in Texas's House. It reasserts the constitutional guarantee of the 10th Amendment.
We need to focus on our state government. We need to focus on our state legislators, the governor's mansion, the state Supreme Court, the sheriffs at the state and local level. All these agencies need to be the focus of freedom-loving people.
And if you do treasure the notion that your rights are unalienable, meaning imbued in you by our Creator, and you want to defend the American circumstance, the only way we can effectively battle the Agenda 21 protocol is to do it locally.
we have the checks and balances in the states to be able to maintain the freedom of our people.
You get involved in your local area. I mean, that's where you can affect the most change.
I don't know why we have FEMA. I don't see anything about a FEMA in our Constitution. I think it should be eliminated.
We're fighting tyranny. We're standing up for liberty. We're the good guys. We have the moral high ground on our side.
All you have to do is get started. Take that first step, and then you'll find that you get this momentum, and you can't stop it.
We are the government.
Do whatever you can to get involved and get to know what is happening in your state. Are they watching people in your state and sending information up to FBI and Homeland Security? Are you going to be profiled in a report issued by your state?
Evidence for disgrace of liberty with brute force killings, mass arrests, and the setting up of concentration camps. Ronald Reagan.
Just be alert, study your Constitution, learn all you can. I think there's certain basic organic documents that you need to become familiar with. I would start with the Mayflower Compact. The next one I would urge you to read is Patrick Henry's famous speech where he ended by saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." Certainly the Declaration of Independence is one it's a philosophical framework. The Constitution came along after that to be actually the blueprint or the framework of a building built upon the ideas espoused in the Declaration of Independence. You must read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, Northwest Ordinance, George Washington's Farewell Address. These are the organic documents from which we came, and it basically expressed who we were when we attained to greatness. It's who we need to go back to. On top of that, there are many other really important books to read to understand your enemy. And I would suggest The Shadows of Power by James Perloff, Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. Another one actually written by one of the enemies, in my opinion, is Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope. So read those books, study and all to know what we are, but also equip yourself with understanding of who your enemy is, because we're in a struggle for our future at this point in time.
All right, so that concludes the Camp FEMA DVD. Lord willing, we're going to start part 2 next time, the Camp FEMA part 2. I can't remember what the subtitle is, but it's the sequel to this documentary here. And one thing I was thinking about is the reason as Christians we're not going to, or we shouldn't, get aggressively involved or looking for political reform or trying to resist this with protests or civil unrest or things like that. Well, there's numerous reasons. One, and I mentioned it earlier, we're aliens in this country. We're pilgrims in this world. We're strangers. We don't belong to these kingdoms. We're born into the countries we're born in physically, but we belong to God. We belong to His kingdom. And our mission is to expose the unfruitful works of darkness and to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ, to show people the danger they're in, both physically here and eternally with hell. Excuse me, hell being much more important to point out to them. And then we're supposed to point them to the light, to the gospel, to Jesus Christ. That's our mission. And so that is the mandate of our kingdom. What's going on in this kingdom is ultimately it's irrelevant. You know, we look into these things again because we want to be on guard. We want to be wise. We want to be alert. We want to make the right moves. We want to try as best as we might prolong our lives and prolong the graces we have. Like in this country, they talk about these inalienable rights that are from God. That's not biblical. You know, as they were talking about that, I was sitting here thinking, what rights do we have by God? We don't have rights. We're slaves to Christ. You know, the patriotic pride that I have the right to free speech and the right to this. No, you don't. You have the mandate from God to speak the gospel, understanding that it's going to cost you because the world hates it. We have the it's not a right to free speech. We have a mandate to godly speech. We have a mandate to speak these things, to proclaim these things, to live these things. And we will passively accept our fate as we do that. We will trust ourselves to the sovereign hand of God. But we won't resist authoritarian systems with bloodshed or with violence, because it's not our kingdom, and we're not so pridefully wrapped up in these rights. We're just saying, look, we're gonna proclaim the gospel. You do what you got to do, government. If you got to kill us, or if I got to try to run from you, whatever. I'm gonna keep proclaiming the gospel. I'm gonna keep telling the truth. I'm gonna keep pointing out, that you are the kingdom of darkness. I'm gonna keep pointing out the devilish inclinations behind your system. But you do what you got to do. It's and that's we are under the sovereign control of God. We don't have to fear them, but we also trust. We don't have to fight the battles. God fights the battles. He's commissioned us to go preach. He said, "Go preach. Go tell others what's going on. Point them to Jesus Christ. He'll take care of everything else. Let Him worry about everything else. We have one mission, one goal. We're blessed. God has blessed us and given us grace, especially in America, that up until this point we've had the freedom to stand and proclaim these gospel messages without threat of arrest or imprisonment or torture or murder. Although you do risk it. You go out on the streets and preach, some bad things might happen to you. But so far, from an authoritarian legal standpoint, we haven't really had to deal with much. We've been free from that, but we understand the rest of the world has been under persecution for thousands of years, And if you go and preach the gospel in a Middle Eastern country or in North Korea or China, you're risking your life. And we've had it easy here in Western culture, but it looks like we're on the precipice of that coming to an end. And it is what it is. We're going to keep preaching. So that's why we don't resist to bloodshed. We just want to be aware, and we want to point people to the truth. To let them know, look, there's only one way to escape, and that's through Jesus Christ. We're all gonna die. What happens next is important. So get right with Jesus Christ. All right, so with that said, I'm going to wrap it up here. Lord willing, like I said, we'll pick up with Camp FEMA 2 next time. All right, thanks for watching, guys. I love you. Talk to you later.